This is my 26th video on my work with a small 00 gauge layout. See part 1 for my reasons for doing this and my lengthy series on my N-gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part is by way of being a fairly brief addendum to my previous video covering ready-to-run locos available for modelling LMS motive power in 00 gauge. I need to make a few clarifications, corrections and additions. This video would really make more sense if you've seen the previous video, which attempted to survey the whole of LMS motive power as available in 00 gauge. The first point I want to address is a clarification. Why did I not include this thing in my previous survey video? Many of you will recognize this. It's an extremely popular model that was available from the very early days of Hornby 00. A 003 rail example is illustrated here. This may be the first LMS tank loco that many modelers, or at least many people playing with train sets, ever saw. The trouble is, it's not a model of an LMS tank loco at all. This early Hornby 062 tank loco is quite clearly based on the L&YR N2 class, which was originally developed by the Great Northern Railway in 1920. A real-world example is shown here in L&YR livery. It's not identical to the Hornby model, but I don't think there's any doubt that the Hornby model was based on this class. Back in the day, Hornby seemed to pretty much feel that they were making toy trains, and it was okay to stick any livery on any loco for the purposes of creating something to market. This, for example, is a Hornby Ginty. Not terribly accurate, but it's definitely what Hornby sold as a Ginty, here as sold in Southern livery, although I don't believe the Southern Railway ever ran a Ginty, although Ginties may well have run over Southern Rails in BR livery after nationalisation. And here's a Hornby Ginty in L&YR livery, which likewise has no basis in history so far as I know. In my survey video I mentioned the Airfix and Hornby versions of the Fowler 4F060 tender freight locomotive. LMYR also apparently issued a version of this in 00 gauge as seen here. It doesn't appear to be a terribly good model, not as good as the Airfix on which the Hornby is, I believe, still based. I have two LMYR 4Fs in N-gauge, and they're fairly approximate models, well about like this, and distinctly poor runners. Next I need to come to a correction. I got my facts wrong about pugs in the previous video. My confusion is, I feel, somewhat understandable, as the term pug seems to be applied to pretty much any 040 tank loco, and sometimes even to small 060 tanks. Shown here is my own example of a pug. Upon further research, this is clearly not based on the L&YR Class 21 pug, as I said previously. Here's a picture of an L&YR Class 21 pug. As you may see, the saddle tank goes all the way to the front of the boiler, and so the chimney actually passes through the saddle tank. This is an example of the Caledonian 264 class, and it's pretty clearly on this that my Hornby model is based. Hornby produced many versions based on this class, a lot in Caledonian livery and several in LMS. They also produced it in many private use liveries such as Huntley and Palmer's and Powergen and others, and also in Midland and Highland Railway liveries, and perhaps most well known of all, they produced a model of this class as Smoky Joe. So it's pretty clear that my pug is based on the Caledonian 264 class, which did indeed serve with the LMS and survived to pass into BR service, with the last withdrawn in 1962. However, Hornby did indeed also produce a model of the L&YR Class 21 pug. I believe that this model was first introduced in 1998, and the most recent version appears to have been issued in 2019. I don't have one of these pugs, so I'll have to look out for one at a reasonable price, as it looks quite a nice model and certainly fits my prototype. Now I want to turn to Wren, a company I neglected to mention at all in my previous video. Most of the models issued by Wren were essentially old Hornby models, either actual Hornby production that was on hand when Lyons Brothers Triang took over Hornby, or models made from the old Hornby moulds which Wren acquired. This, for example, is a Wren version of the N2 tank, which I discussed at the start of this video, continuing the Hornby tradition of incorrectly presenting this class in LMS livery. And here's a Wren example of the N2 in L&YR livery. The L&YR certainly did use these locos, though I'm a bit doubtful as to whether they would ever have finished them in apple green. Here's an LMS diesel shunter, apparently branded Wren. I think this must be a reissue of the Lima model, of which I have an example. Wren did, however, right towards the end of the company's independent existence, produce a couple of models of steam locos that were entirely their own tooling. One of these was the Bullied Q1, so quite outside my prototype, but the other could hardly have been more central to my prototype. Wren made an original, unrebuilt, parallel boiler, single-chimney Royal Scot. I'm perhaps more drawn to this loco than to any other, as it's one that I know for sure my grandfather drove. Unfortunately, Wren's model of the Royal Scot came out when the Wren company was already in difficulties and not many were produced and sold. The result of this is that the model is a collectible rarity, and so examples are insanely expensive. The cheapest I've seen one for sale is around £300, and they often go for over £500, so much as I'd like one, I don't think I'll be getting one. I don't really know anything about the quality of the mechanism of this model, and one can't even reasonably predict, as Wren never had a chance to establish a track record. It appears from this picture that the model was loco-driven with no tender pickups. The Wren Royal Scot was also issued in a lined black LMS livery, as seen here. I find the fact that the paperwork refers to Wren 00/HO locomotives a bit suspect. A loco model is either in 1:76 scale, making it 00, or 1:87 scale, making it HO. If it's not one or the other, then what scale was used in modelling it? The Wren Royal Scot was also issued in British Railways livery. I thought at first they might be taking liberties here, as this is an unrebuilt Royal Scot, but actually this version of the model is entirely proper. Rebuilding started in 1943 and the entire class were rebuilt, but the rebuilding of the whole class was not completed until 1955, and the loco modelled here, 46110, originally 6110, Grenadier Guardsman, was not rebuilt until 1953. So it did indeed serve unrebuilt as a BR loco for 5 years. So that's it for these brief clarifications, corrections and additions. Please do comment below if you have anything to add on the subject of modelling LMS motive power in 00 gauge.